helmet, adjusted his tiny battle helmet and glared at the primitive vessel floating before them through the viewport of the Fluffington Empire's most feared dreadnought, the Cuttle Crusher. At 3 feet tall, with powder blue fur and enormous amber eyes, he was the epitome of Fluffington military might. His voice squeaked with righteous fury as he addressed his equally diminutive crew. "Prepare the boarding pods, you mangy flea bags. Today we show these pathetic humans why the Fluffington Empire rules 17 sectors of this galaxy." Lieutenant Buttons, whose pink fur was meticulously groomed into regulation spikes, saluted with a paw that could barely wrap around his plasma rifle. "Sir, shouldn't we at least scan for defensive systems first? Intelligence reports suggest humans might be more dangerous than they appear." "Nonsense," Whiskers snorted, his button nose twitching with disdain. "Look at that rust bucket they call a ship. It's held together with what appears to be duct tape and false hope. These humans are clearly a primitive species ripe for conquest." The boarding pod launched with all the majesty of a soap bubble in a hurricane. Within minutes they had cut through the human vessel's hull with their adorable little laser cutters, expecting to find cowering primitives begging for mercy. Instead, they found Jake Murphy. Jake was 42 years old, wore a maintenance jumpsuit covered in coffee stains and questionable grease marks, and was currently trying to fix a coffee machine that had been broken since the Clinton administration. He looked up from his work as 6 tiny, fluffy aliens burst through his wall like the world's most adorable SWAT team. His first reaction was not terror. His first reaction was to drop his wrench and gasp, "Oh my God, you guys are so freaking cute." Whiskers raised his miniature weapon, which looked like a hairdryer designed by someone who had only heard weapons described second-hand. "Surrender, primitive human, or face the wrath of the Fluffington Empire." Jake's eyes went wide with delight. "Did you just talk? Oh, that's precious. Are you guys like space teddy bears? Do you need snacks? I think I have some crackers somewhere." The other Fluffington warriors exchanged confused glances. This was not going according to the manual. Sergeant Fuzzbottom, whose purple fur made him look like a rejected My Little Pony character, whispered urgently to his captain. "Sir, I don't think he understands that we're here to conquer him." "Then we'll make it clearer," Whiskers squeaked, puffing out his tiny chest. "Human, we are the terror of the galaxy. 17 civilizations have fallen before our unstoppable might. Surrender now or be destroyed." Jake clapped his hands together with genuine excitement. "Oh, you're like tiny space Vikings. That's amazing. Hey, are you hungry? I was just about to make some soup. You guys look like you could use a good meal, and maybe a nice warm bath." The Fluffington warriors stood there, weapons raised, looking like militant stuffed animals who had lost the instruction manual for intimidation. This was definitely not how first contact was supposed to go. Whiskers decided a more dramatic approach was needed. He holstered his adorable weapon, and pulled out what the Fluffington Empire called their doomsday device, a glowing orb about the size of a tennis ball that hummed ominously. "Behold, human, the sphere of infinite destruction. One press of this button and your entire ship will be reduced to cosmic dust." Jake leaned forward, squinting at the device with the expression of someone trying to figure out if that weird noise his car was making meant he needed new brake pads or just an oil change. "Is that thing nuclear? Because if it is, you really shouldn't be carrying it around without proper shielding. That's like basic safety protocol. Here, let me get you a lead-lined box or something." Before Whiskers could stop him, Jake was already rummaging through a supply closet, muttering about OSHA violations and proper hazmat procedures. The captain's fur bristled with frustration. "I don't want a box, you fool. I want your surrender." Right, totally get that," Jake called from inside the closet. "But first, safety. My mom always said you can't conquer the galaxy if you're dead from radiation poisoning. She was very practical that way. Found it." He emerged with a small metal container and held it out expectantly. "There you go, little guy. Much safer." Lieutenant Buttons decided to try a different tactic. He activated his personal shield generator, which surrounded him in a shimmering blue force field, and began what the Fluffington military called the Dance of Inevitable Doom. A series of aggressive martial arts moves that looked suspiciously like a toddler having a tantrum in a bounce house. "Witness our combat prowess, human. Tremble before our ancient warrior traditions." Jake watched with the same expression people get when watching puppies learn to walk. "Oh my God, that's so cute. Are you doing interpretive dance? Is this like a cultural greeting thing? Should I do one back?" Before anyone could stop him, Jake started doing what appeared to be a combination of the Macarena and a yoga routine he half remembered from a DVD his ex-girlfriend had left behind. The Fluffington warriors stopped their intimidation display to stare. That's when the ship's AI decided to chime in. Murderbot 3000 had been installed with the most sophisticated artificial intelligence the Fluffington Empire could afford, which meant it had the personality of a customer service representative who had just been told their shift was being extended indefinitely. "Captain McBounce," the AI said in a tone that suggested it would rather be literally anywhere else. "I feel obligated to inform you that according to my databases, humans are actually classified as a Class 12 extinction event species by the Galactic Council." Whiskers paused mid-squeak. "That's impossible. Look at him. He's offering us soup." "Yes, sir. That appears to be consistent with their behavioral patterns. They feed things before they destroy them. It's considered a form of psychological warfare." Jake had stopped his interpretive dance and was now in the kitchen area, actually heating up a can of chicken noodle soup. "Sorry, what was that about psychological warfare? I wasn't really listening. I was trying to remember if you guys look more like you'd prefer chicken noodle or tomato. You strike me as chicken noodle types." "See?" Murderbot 3000 continued with digital resignation. "Classic intimidation tactic. He's demonstrating his ability to provide sustenance, thereby establishing dominance through resource control." Sergeant Fuzzbottom lowered his weapon uncertainly. "But sir, it smells really good." "Don't fall for it," Whiskers hissed, though his own stomach was beginning to rumble. "It's clearly some sort of chemical weapon designed to weaken our resolve." Jake ladled soup into 6 small bowls he had found in the back of a cabinet, adding little crackers to each one. "There we go. Nothing like comfort food after a long day of space travel. I bet you guys have been flying around in those tiny ships for hours. Must be exhausting being so small and fierce all the time." The Fluffington warriors found themselves faced with their greatest enemy yet, genuine human hospitality, backed by the kind of oblivious confidence that comes from a species that once looked at wolves and thought pet material. 20 minutes later, the Fluffington warriors were reluctantly sipping soup from tiny bowls, while Jake sat cross-legged on the floor, having adjusted his height to what he considered a more conversation-friendly level for his adorable guests. "So let me get this straight," Jake said, carefully not making any sudden movements that might startle the armed teddy bears. "You guys run 17 sectors, you've conquered multiple civilizations, and your ship is called the Cuddle Crusher?" "The name is meant to be ironic," Whiskers explained defensively, his voice slightly muffled by soup. "It strikes fear into the hearts of our enemies." "Right, sure, I can see that," Jake nodded seriously. "Very intimidating. Very snugly intimidating." That's when the communication system crackled to life with the voice of Admiral Snuggles von Destroyer, Supreme Commander of the Fluffington Third Fleet. "Captain McBounce, report. Your boarding operation should have been complete 7 minutes ago." Whiskers nearly choked on his soup. Through the comm system, he could see his superior officer on the bridge of the flagship Hug of Death, an even fluffier specimen with silver fur and a tiny admiral's hat that somehow made him look like he should be in a children's book rather than commanding a space fleet. "Admiral, we've encountered some complications." "What sort of complications could one primitive human possibly present? Do you require backup?" Jake brightened up immediately. "Oh, more of you guys are coming, that's great. I should probably make more soup." Admiral Snuggles's expression grew stern, which, on a face that looked like it belonged on a get-well-soon card, was more adorable than intimidating. "Captain, please tell me you have not been compromised by enemy psychological warfare." "No, sir, we're just having soup." "Soup is not part of standard conquest protocol." Jake had wandered back to the kitchen and was opening more cans. "Hey, Admiral, Snuggles, right? How many more of your friends are coming? I want to make sure I have enough for everyone." There was a long pause. Admiral Snuggles blinked several times, his large eyes reflecting what could only be described as existential confusion. Did that human just address me directly? "He's been doing that for the past half hour, sir," Lieutenant Buttons reported. "He also asked if we needed our fur brushed and offered to knit us tiny sweaters." Jake called out from the kitchen. "The offer still stands, by the way. I took a knitting class during my divorce. Very therapeutic. I bet you guys would look great in little rainbow scarves." Admiral Snuggles began pacing back and forth on his bridge, which given his size meant he could pace the entire width in about 4 steps. "This is clearly some advanced form of cultural warfare. Deploy the entire Third Fleet. We'll show this human the true might of the Fluffington Empire." "Sir," Murderbot 3000 interjected with the digital equivalent of clearing its throat, "I should mention that my long-range sensors are detecting approaching human vessels. Apparently word has gotten out about our soup situation." Jake perked up again. "Oh, good. That'll be Betty and the crew. They were supposed to meet me here anyway to help fix the navigation array. Betty's great. You guys will love her. She's got like 17 different ways to kill someone with a paperclip, but she makes amazing cookies. Whiskers felt a chill run through his tiny spine that had nothing to do with the soup cooling in his bowl. Did he just say his friend knows 17 ways to kill someone with office supplies? It's probably more psychological warfare, Admiral Snuggles said, though he didn't sound entirely convinced. No species that offers strangers soup could be truly dangerous. In the distance, they could all see a human ship approaching. Unlike Jake's maintenance vessel, this one looked like it had been designed by someone who took the concept of aggressive architecture very seriously indeed. Jake waved at the viewport as if the approaching ship could see him. "Hey, Betty, over here! Bring the cookies, we've got company!" The human ship docked with all the subtlety of a freight train parking in a flower garden. Through the airlock stepped Commander Betty Tank Rodriguez, and the Fluffington warriors immediately understood why Jake had mentioned the 17 ways to kill someone with office supplies. Betty was 5 feet 4 inches of compressed violence wrapped in a maintenance uniform, with graying hair pulled back in a regulation bun, and the kind of expression that suggested she had personally wrestled entropy into submission on multiple occasions. She took one look at the scene, Jake sitting on the floor with 6 tiny aliens eating soup, and sighed the sigh of someone whose day had just gotten significantly weirder. "Jake, please tell me you didn't adopt more strays." "They're not strays," Jake protested. "They're the Fluffington Empire. They came here to conquer us, but then I realized they probably hadn't eaten in hours, and look at them, Betty. Look at those little faces." Betty looked. Captain Whiskers tried to puff up menacingly, but with soup still on his whiskers and his tiny helmet slightly askew, the effect was somewhat diminished. "Jake, these are armed hostiles." "Armed adorables," Jake corrected. "There's a difference." Betty walked over to the communication console where Admiral Snuggles was still visible, his entire fleet arranged behind him in what they probably thought was an intimidating battle formation, but looked more like a convoy of ice cream trucks. "This your boss?" she asked Whiskers, who nodded mutely. Betty leaned toward the screen. "Admiral, I'm Commander Rodriguez, Human Maintenance Division 7. I understand you're having some kind of territorial dispute with my colleague." Admiral Snuggles drew himself up to his full 3-foot height. "Human, you stand before the assembled might of the Fluffington Third Fleet. 17 dreadnoughts, each capable of reducing a moon to its component atoms." Betty studied the fleet display with the expression of someone examining a mildly interesting insect. "Aha! And you decided to start this territorial dispute by boarding a maintenance vessel? It seemed strategically sound at the time." "Right." Betty turned back to Jake. "Did you explain the whole humans find small furry things irresistibly cute situation to them?" "I tried, but I think they thought I was running some kind of psychological operation." That's when the situation got more complicated. 3 more alien fleets dropped out of hyperspace in rapid succession, each one apparently more terrifying than the last. First came the Shard Collective, crystalline beings that looked like angry geometric nightmares and communicated through frequencies that made normal species bleed. Their leader, Primary Fragment Echo 79, materialized on the communication screen in a shower of prismatic light. "Fluffington's scum," the crystal being announced in a voice like breaking glass. "We have come to claim this sector. Surrender now or face crystalline justice." Betty glanced at the new arrivals and shrugged. "Jake, didn't we have a shipment of those decorative crystals for the officers' lounge? The ones that needed polishing?" "Yeah, they're in Storage Bay 12. Why?" "No reason." Betty turned back to Echo 79. "Nice to meet you. Love the whole light show thing you've got going on. Very Vegas. Jake, grab the polishing compound, would you?" Before Echo 79 could process what was happening, Betty had produced a cloth and some kind of cleaning solution from her utility belt and was advancing on the communication console. The crystal being's prismatic form flickered uncertainly. "What are you doing, human?" "You've got some spots on your surface there. Probably from space travel. Don't worry, this stuff works great on mineral deposits." The next fleet to arrive belonged to the Void Crawlers. Beings of living shadow who existed partially outside normal space-time, and whose very presence was supposed to drive lesser species insane. Their representative, something calling itself the Whisper that Devours Light, appeared as a writhing mass of darkness punctuated by too many eyes. "Mortals," it intoned in a voice like the heat death of the universe, "your time has come. We are the darkness between stars, the silence after the last breath, the—" "Oh, for crying out loud," Betty interrupted, pulling out what appeared to be an industrial-strength flashlight. Jake, didn't we have that problem with the shadow creatures in Cargo Bay 15 last month? Yeah, turned out they just needed better lighting. Poor things were practically malnourished. Betty switched on the flashlight, which blazed with the intensity of a small sun. The whisper that devours light recoiled, its form becoming somehow more solid and considerably less ominous. There you go, Betty said cheerfully. Much better. You guys really need to get more vitamin D, or whatever the shadow equivalent is. The final fleet belonged to the hive mind of Arcturus Prime, a collective consciousness of insectoid beings whose individual units stood 8 feet tall and looked like someone had crossed a praying mantis with a nightmare. Queen Node Zeta, speaking for the collective, clicked and chittered threateningly. We are the swarm. We are inevitable. Resistance is futile. You will be assimilated into our collective consciousness or consumed. Jake looked up from where he was now sharing soup with several Fluffington warriors. Oh, bug people. Betty, remember that ant problem we had in the hydroponics lab? Yeah, turned out they just needed better organization and some protein supplements. Betty walked over to a supply cabinet and pulled out what appeared to be a spray bottle and some kind of energy bar. The Queen Node's mandibles clicked uncertainly. This is not how conquest is supposed to proceed, she chittered. Tell me about it, Admiral Snuggles muttered from his screen, now watching his inevitable victory turn into what appeared to be an impromptu customer service seminar. Betty looked around at the assembled representatives of galactic terror with the expression of someone whose afternoon had been mildly disrupted but who was too professional to complain about it. Okay, so let me see if I've got this straight. You're all here to conquer this sector, but nobody bothered to check if it was actually worth conquering, and now you're all having some kind of interdimensional standoff over a maintenance station. The various alien representatives exchanged glances, insofar as beings made of crystal shadow and chitinous nightmare could exchange glances. When you put it like that, Whiskers admitted quietly, it does sound a bit silly. The revelation hit the assembled galactic terrors like a wet towel to the face. Primary fragment, Echo 7, 9's crystalline form, flickered with what could only be described as existential confusion. Wait, the crystal being chimed, its voice like wind through a broken chandelier. Are you telling us that your species genuinely finds us aesthetically pleasing? Jake looked up from where he was now hand-feeding soup to Sergeant Fuzzbottom, who had given up all pretense of being a fierce warrior and was making tiny, contented purring sounds. Well, yeah, I mean, look at you guys. You're like living mood rings. And you, he pointed at the whisper that devours light, who was now basking under Betty's industrial flashlight like a cat in a sunbeam. You're like a really dramatic lava lamp. It's actually kind of soothing. The whisper's multiple eyes blinked in sequence. But we are the embodiment of existential dread. We represent the void between thoughts. The silence after the last star dies. Betty, who was now methodically cleaning what appeared to be space dust off Echo 79's prismatic surfaces, paused in her work. Honey, I've worked customer service for 23 years. You're gonna have to try a lot harder than cosmic horror to faze me. Now hold still. You've got a spot right there. Echo 79's entire form seemed to shudder with something that might have been pleasure. That actually feels quite nice. Admiral Snuggles, who had been watching this display with growing horror, finally found his voice. This is impossible. We are apex predators. We have conquered 17 sectors. Species flee before us in terror. Oh, sweetie, Jake said, gently scratching behind Whisker's tiny ears, causing the captain to go completely limp with bliss. I think there might have been a translation error somewhere along the way. Murderbot 3000, who had been quietly running calculations in the background, chose this moment to contribute its analysis. Captain, I have been reviewing historical records of Fluffington conquests. It appears that, in 73.4% of cases, the conquered species voluntarily submitted after one look at Fluffington forces. Because of our terrifying reputation, Lieutenant Buttons squeaked hopefully. Because they wanted to protect you, Betty said gently, now brushing what appeared to be space lint off Buttons' pink fur. Jake, show them the video log from the Centauri incident. Jake pulled up a holographic display showing news footage from what the Fluffington Empire called their most decisive victory. In the recording, the leader of the Centauri Republic was addressing his people. Citizens, we have received demands for surrender from something called the Fluffington Empire. I have seen their representatives, and while I'm sure they're very fierce in their own way, we simply cannot in good conscience fight against what appear to be tiny space teddy bears. We hereby surrender and offer them our unconditional protection. The assembled Fluffington warriors stared at the recording in stunned silence. Queen Nodzlita's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. This explains much about galactic politics. We always wondered why the Fluffington Empire controlled so much territory, despite having no apparent military capability. "We have military capability," Whiskers protested weakly, though it was hard to take him seriously while Jake was giving him what appeared to be a tiny tummy rub. "You have the galaxy's most effective psychological warfare system," Betty corrected. "You make every other species want to adopt you and keep you safe. Do you have any idea how powerful that is?" The whisper that devours light had apparently discovered that stretching its shadowy form under the warm light felt amazing. But what about our reputation for existential terror? Jake pulled up another holographic display, this one showing tourist brochures. Void Crawler's Space is actually the galaxy's most popular meditation retreat destination. People pay thousands of credits to experience the peaceful darkness between stars and find inner silence through cosmic contemplation. The whisper's multiple eyes went wide. "They're using our existential dread as a spa treatment?" "Best customer reviews in the galaxy," Betty confirmed. 5 stars across the board. "Life-changing experience. Found my inner peace. The darkness really helped me put things in perspective." Echo 79 was now actively leaning into Betty's cleaning efforts. "What about the Shard Collective's reign of crystalline terror?" "Honey, you're living art installations. There are entire museums dedicated to experiencing the sublime beauty of geometric perfection. The Artistic Council of Vega Prime has been trying to book you for an exhibition for 3 years. Queen Nodzlita's collective consciousness seemed to go offline for a moment as thousands of insectoid minds processed this information simultaneously. When she came back online, her voice had taken on a distinctly different tone. "Are you telling us that the galaxy doesn't see us as terrifying, hive-minded conquerors?" Jake looked at the 8-foot-tall praying mantis alien and tilted his head thoughtfully. "I mean, you're basically a really efficient cleaning crew with excellent organizational skills. Do you know how hard it is to find good help these days?" The various representatives of galactic terror looked at each other, then at the humans who were treating them like a combination of pets, art projects, and really useful service providers. Admiral Snuggles spoke for all of them when he said in a very small voice, "We may have fundamentally misunderstood our place in the galactic ecosystem." "It happens," Betty said philosophically, now applying what appeared to be furniture polish to Echo 79's surfaces. "The important thing is that everyone learns something. Jake, do we have enough soup for everyone?" "I'll make more," Jake said cheerfully, gently placing Sergeant Fuzzbottom on a soft cushion where the tiny warrior immediately curled up for a nap. "This is turning out to be way more fun than fixing the navigation array." 6 months later, Jake Murphy stood in what had once been a simple maintenance station and was now the unofficial headquarters of the most successful interspecies cooperation program in galactic history. The sign by the door read, "Galactic Adoption and Mutual Protection Agency, No Conquest Necessary," in 17 different languages, including Fluffington Squeaks, Crystal Harmonics, and Shadow Whispers. "Jake," Betty called from her new office, which had a window overlooking what appeared to be the galaxy's most unusual daycare center. "The Regellian Collective is on line 3. They want to know if we have any Fluffington warriors available for their new customer relations department." Jake looked down at Captain Whiskers, who was now wearing a tiny customer service uniform and had somehow become the most effective diplomatic mediator in 3 sectors. The former terror of the galaxy was currently teaching a class on conflict resolution through adorableness to a group of battle-hardened Klingon-equivalent warriors who kept melting every time Whiskers demonstrated his disappointed but not angry expression. "Tell them Whiskers has an opening next Tuesday, but they'll need to provide their own tiny furniture and premium snack packages." In the corner, Admiral Snuggles von Destroyer had established what he called the Strategic Cuddle Command Center, where he coordinated the Fluffington Empire's new role as the galaxy's premier conflict resolution specialists. "Turns out, when your appearance made every other species want to protect you, you became very good at making people calm down and talk through their problems." "Human Jake," Admiral Snuggles squeaked, looking up from a holographic display showing 17 different diplomatic crises. "The Andromedans and the Tau Cetians have agreed to peace talks, but only if Lieutenant Buttons mediates the discussion." Jake looked over at Lieutenant Buttons, who was currently being gently brushed by 3 different species of formerly warlike aliens who had discovered that grooming tiny space teddy bears was incredibly therapeutic. The pink-furred warrior had become so popular that there was actually a waiting list to brush his fur. "Tell them Buttons can do it, but they have to promise not to fight over who gets to pet him during recess." The whisper that devours light had perhaps undergone the most dramatic career change. The living embodiment of existential dread had discovered that when properly illuminated and given appropriate background music, it could create the most relaxing meditation environments in the known galaxy. It was currently running 17 wellness centers across 3 star systems and had a best-selling album called Soothing Sounds of the Void Between Stars. Human companions, the whisper intoned in its voice like distant thunder. I have received another request for a dark energy spa weekend. The waiting list is now at 6 standard months. Jake grinned as he watched the former cosmic horror float peacefully under its specialized lighting array, occasionally forming soothing geometric patterns that had somehow become the latest trend in interior decoration. Primary Fragment Echo 79 had found its calling as a living art installation that could also perform therapy. The crystal being had discovered that its prismatic form could create light patterns that not only looked beautiful, but could actually help treat various psychological conditions. It was currently booked solid for the next 2 years and had a documentary crew following it around. Jake Human, Echo 79 chimed, its surfaces sparkling with contentment. The Museum of Natural Harmony wants to extend my exhibition for another 6 months. They're calling it Crystalline Serenity, Finding Peace Through Geometric Meditation. That's great, buddy. Just remember to take breaks. Even living art needs vacation time. Queen Node Zeta and the Hive Mind had perhaps found the most practical application of their abilities. It turned out that a collective consciousness was incredibly efficient at organizing large-scale projects, and their insectoid forms were perfect for tasks that required precision and coordination. They had become the galaxy's premier event planning and logistics company. Attention, carbon-based coordinators, Queen Node Zeta announced, her mandibles clicking with satisfaction. We have successfully organized the Galactic Peace Festival, 14,000 species, 47 different atmospheric requirements, and not a single scheduling conflict. The collective consciousness is pleased with this efficiency. Betty emerged from her office carrying a steaming mug of coffee and wearing the expression of someone who had somehow stumbled into the best job in the galaxy. She surveyed the scene, former galactic terrors now running successful businesses, tiny warriors mediating interstellar disputes, and Jake somehow making it all work through the simple application of treating everyone like they mattered. You know what's funny? She said, settling into a chair next to Jake. The Galactic Council spent centuries trying to figure out how to maintain peace between all these different species. And turns out the solution was just giving everyone what they actually needed instead of what they thought they wanted. Betty gestured at Sergeant Fuzzbottom, who was now running a successful anxiety therapy practice by simply letting stressed-out aliens pet his purple fur while he purred. Jake nodded, watching as a group of former enemy species worked together to set up what appeared to be the galaxy's first interspecies picnic. Who would have thought that the most feared creatures in the galaxy just needed someone to take care of them? Murderbot 3, who had been upgraded to Healthful Bot 3 and now managed scheduling for the entire operation, chimed in with its perpetually resigned but somehow more cheerful voice. Statistical analysis indicates that 97.3% of galactic conflicts stem from unmet needs for security, purpose, and social connection. Current operational model addresses all 3 factors simultaneously. Plus, Jake added, scratching behind Whisker's ears as the tiny captain updated him on the latest diplomatic breakthrough. It turns out humans really are good at this whole taking care of things business. Betty raised her coffee mug in a toast. To the galaxy's most successful case of mistaken identity. Through the windows they could see ships from dozens of species arriving and departing peacefully. The former Cuddle Crusher was now a passenger ferry running cultural exchange programs. The Hug of Death had been converted into a mobile meditation center. The Crystal Being's ships served as traveling art galleries, and the Shadow Creatures' vessels had become popular venues for cosmic contemplation retreats. Jake looked around at his unlikely family of former galactic terrors turned productive citizens and grinned. You know what the best part is? What's that? Nobody's trying to conquer anybody anymore. Turns out when you give people a purpose and make them feel valued, they don't need to prove how tough they are by blowing stuff up. Captain Whiskers looked up from his diplomatic reports and squeaked proudly. The Fluffington Empire's new motto is Conquest Through Cuddles, now with 97% less actual conquest. And in a development that no one could have predicted, the galaxy had never been more peaceful. All because one maintenance worker had looked at the universe's most feared warriors and thought, they look like they could use a snack and a hug. Sometimes the best solutions are the simplest ones. Sometimes what the galaxy needs isn't more fear, but more people willing to say, "You look hungry, want some soup?" to a bunch of tiny space teddy bears with conquest issues. And sometimes, just sometimes, the most effective defense against galactic domination is an irresistible urge to adopt anything small and fluffy that shows up at your door, regardless of how many sectors they claim to have conquered. The universe, it turned out, was a much nicer place when everyone had someone who cared about them, even if they were 3-foot-tall aliens with weapons that looked like hair dryers and an unfortunate tendency to name their ships things like the Cuddle Crusher. Jake Murphy, former maintenance worker and current head of the Galactic Adoption and Mutual Protection Agency, wouldn't have it any other way.